Because I'll tell you what, that knot goes down your arm. Of course, a lot of you guys got the tie on loops now, so you don't have that. But it's, boy, you got a lethal thing going right past a lot of, see those veins in there? It's nice to have that arm guard on. Plus, the number 2 is to compress the clothing on your arm. All right. When you shoot any bow and you put razor sharp heads in it, make sure you always have a full case quiver. Because if you didn't, if you go to the woods and you got a pocket full of broadheads, basically in your pants or something, that these are going to, you're probably going to be the one that's in the obituaries tomorrow, not the animal. Always have a case on, a cover on your quiver. Now, whether it's a hip quiver or whatever, make sure it has a case on it. Treat all broadheads like a gun, as if it's a loaded weapon. Don't go to the field thinking it is. In the old school, they used to have a deal, and it's basically on recurves. This was your quiver, the 3-piece quiver. And you had the 2 parts, one the upper and lower limb, and then you actually just took what they did. They would take their broadhead, one of their broadheads in there, and they would clip that into them. That was your cover. That was better than nothing. But that was better because before that, before they came up with that, you were walking around with maybe 3 broadheads or 4, what was that, 1, 2, 3. You had 3 broadheads sticking out of the top of your hole like that. Then some guy said, hey, we better put a cap on it because that's awful unsafe. So always make sure, which I'm sure most of you do now, have a quiver hood on it. If you see somebody not doing that, try to draw their attention, you know, because that's a lethal, that's an accident just waiting to happen. So always try to make sure those are covered up. More accidents can really screw you up. Getting your finger cut just before opening day, because I'll tell you what, that don't know deer from you. And they're razor sharp, and always have razor sharp broadheads. If you shoot that broadhead in the dirt, what should you do? Sharpen it, or on the new blades, put new blades on it. Expandable, if you shoot an expandable one time and it hits the dirt, you can buy those little blades that go back on there, but boy, they're a bear to put in there. I know I've tried that, and I've done it. You know, it takes some time to put that little spring in there, that little set screw. But if you shoot a broadhead one time, and that's the nice thing about a traditional head, you can sharpen that head. You know, and so if you go on like an out-of-state big game hunt up north somewhere where you can't take a whole lot of gear, and you take a half a dozen or 10 broadheads, you can always take your file and do those pretty fast and put an edge back on. That's a nice thing about a traditional head like that, where you got some of these elaborate broadheads, you're sort of, there ain't no convenient or sporting goods store out in the bush, but you can just take that, take your little file, put your home right back on it. But no matter which one you shoot, make sure they're ultimately sharp. Now this fiberglass arrow, what's this for? How many of you guys bow fish? Nobody bow? Jason, bow fishes? That's a pretty neat deal. It gives you some good experience, gives you some game time out in the field with your bow. Go down to one of these big water confinements, you know, a Rathburn or something like that. And they got some neat stuff with these. This is your 90-pound test that goes in that container, and it mounts about like that game tracker. And when you shoot it, the string goes out, and the fish is in there, and you just pull it back. But you got to have a fiberglass arrow because the reflection on the water and the fish is usually deeper than what it looks like. And that big heavy fiberglass arrow, what that does is give you the weight to penetrate the water. If you try to shoot an aluminum arrow on there, but just, you know, you don't have the weight, it would just, you know, glance off or wouldn't go in there very far. So you got to have a fiberglass arrow on that. Okay, how many of you people shoot with a release? How many people don't shoot with the release? Oh, okay. There's 2 guys. I pick my nose with my right hand and I shoot with my right hand. So, you know, I was on the corner with it, so that's what I use. But I think some guys get in trouble with their releases. They lose them. So if you go on a, extended hunt, you want to make sure you got it. If I lose this, I'm in the hospital anyway, if something happens. But with that said, there are a few years ago, 2 years in a row, just before I was going on big time hunts, I worked construction, and I got my bow fingers messed up. Every year I would get them cut, and I'd get in a hurry with a saw or something, smashed one, and I'm trying to, boy, that's pretty painful, throwing that back with your fingers, and Herb would always get, see, if you shot with a release, you wouldn't have that problem. But I've seen them miss with your fingers with a release or whatever, so it doesn't matter. You're going to miss, you're going to miss. All right. We'll get Tom out here at the center stage here. See the little tip sheet. First time I brought this guy home, the daughter was young, and he was naked standing in the kitchen. And she thought there was a naked guy standing in the kitchen. Oh! He fell over. That's probably about the second time he got damn union employee. He went on a sit-down strike. His benefits, he got better than me, room and board for free. But, anyhow, get him back up there. Okay. We went over your bow, and somebody asked me about Illuminox. Illuminox are legal in Iowa. They're just not legal in Pope and Young. So if you shot a, okay, you have one. I got one on that board. If you shoot Illuminox, they're a good deal. It's just that if you want to register your animal in Pope and Young, it's going to be in the fair chase affidavit. It says you can't have Illuminox. Well, you just make that little flipper. That's nice. I can take it off. Throw it away, put another one on. Anyhow, I'll lay this bow over here. We want to start from the basics. First thing we're going to have to do, now that we know our equipment, any questions on equipment? There's a lot that.
What's the reasoning behind carbon-covered aluminum arrow? I guess I don't understand why they went that route.
Well, it made a stiffer arrow, plus it had the aluminum core in it, and it was just a better, that Easton was trying to make a more safer arrow to where it didn't break down like those ones that I showed you. So they put that aluminum core, then they wrapped. It got rid of the directional. Did you see how that snapped? That snapped a lot cleaner, and it was a little more safer because some of these onset arrows, when they shattered, that stuff, it could shatter when you shot it. It'd go right up your arm,
So why not just go with aluminum then?
Well, because this is lighter than aluminum, and you get more. Let me think. This is brain freeze. Spine. You can get more spine out of this. Well, why we're talking about what spine mean? The spine of an arrow.
Stiffness.
The stiffness. Okay. Stiffness of an arrow. If you got an arrow this long, and you got the same arrow that's only this long, which one's going to be stiffer? That's right. That's the spine. So if you're shooting an arrow and you're not getting good arrow flight out of it, and some of these new modern day bows, that's why you got to go over to a spine chart, and it'll recommend do just the amount and still straighten out before it hits the target. And that at a pro shop can set you up with the arrows. The arrow selection today is not as difficult as it used to be in the past. But pretty much one will do a lot of things. But the spine is the stiffness of the arrow. It does. Keep that in mind, because if you put a bigger broadhead on it, you can also weaken the spine. Because now you got more weight sitting out here in front, and so now when that's getting hit in the pants, it's got to push this weight, so it's going to wiggle back worse. If you want to get more spine in the arrow, you can chop it off a little bit, or you can put a smaller head on it, and that'll increase it. So you want to make sure you got all your equipment matched so you can get the maximum performance out of that Matthews $1,000 bow. Because if you got a $1,000 bow and a 2-cent arrow, you know, the arrow's what's doing the killing. And the same way with the broadhead. There's no use to having a $12 carbon arrow, lumen carbon arrow, and you're shooting a dollar broadhead that's made out of tinfoil. I mean, as soon as it hits something, you know, it doesn't do the job. So make sure your weapons are matched, and you know, it's like say, if you spend $1,000 on a bow, you're probably going to have to get the maximum performance. It's probably going to cost you $10 and $12 for the arrow. You can actually have with the new broadheads and the arrows out, you're shooting $25. You know, it's not, you know, you got most of those expandables are $10 or more. And that's why I shoot muskies. I can get 6 for $30. Because I just can't see that kind of money for the same, you know. But that's up to the individual. If you got a lot of money, there's somebody out there that'll take it. That spine, the stiffness of the arrow. Longer arrow, weaker. Shorter arrow, stiffer.